Hello there, digital world, and welcome back to yet another episode of Spliced In Later. I hope you all are keeping well. It feels like forever since I last spoke to you all. But it definitely hasn't been, it's only been a week. I guess because my last episode was the cheaper by the dozen review, and not only was that movie forgettable, but I think my overall enthusiasm for it was quite forgettable too, so I blocked it out of my mind. But we're making up for it this week. We got 3 episodes coming at you back to back across 3 days. After today's episode, there are 2 movie reviews that will be coming on Wednesday and Thursday. It's going to be a lot of content in a very short amount of time. So I will say off the bat that after that, I will be taking the week off next week because there'll be nothing else to talk about for a bit, and I'll take a moment to rest me weary head. So some good stuff coming, hopefully, at least interesting to talk about. And off the topic here, but if anyone's wondering if I'll talk about the Academy Awards, I will not be. I know when I started my podcast way back in 2020, I was devoting a lot of time to that. I just don't care. Oscars are boring. It's always the same sort of stuff, the same sort of results. If anyone wants me to talk about the thing that happened, you don't need me to because everybody else is. However, I will say very briefly that I am actually genuinely satisfied with a lot of the results that came out of there. I'm happy that Coda won Best Picture. I'm happy that Dune won so many awards. And I'm happy that No Time to Die was picked for Best Song. Some good results, but that's all we'll talk about there. What we're actually talking about here today is our continuing series of episodes looking into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's been some time since our last one. I think the Avengers I did back in January, maybe even earlier than that. I'm not sure. It's probably the only continuing series we've got going on that's consistent. And when I say consistent, I mean when I remember or have time to do it. But it's also the thing that I enjoy talking about the most. So we're getting right into it here with our look at Iron Man 3. Because what we've been doing is either we've been going back to the very beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and working our way through the movies and TV shows that were released in chronological order. So as of this recording, we have done all of Phase 1. Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, and the Avengers. Then we sometimes tackle it from another angle, which is if there's new Marvel content that's coming out from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I pretty much review it off bat. If it's a movie, it gets reviewed as soon as I've seen it. If it's a TV show on Disney Plus, I wait until the full season has concluded before I review that. So pretty much anything from Phase 4 has been covered, whether it's Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, and Hawkeye. So there's a lot of content already that is all helpfully compiled. If that's the only content you want to listen to on this podcast or on this show, there's a YouTube channel where I've got all this stuff saved, and there is a very nifty, handy MCU playlist for you to watch it all in the chronological order. I even put them in chronological order with the Phase 4 stuff, so it's not bouncing back and forth. It is a continuous story with a very big gap in the middle that I'm very slowly filling. So today, we are moving on to Phase 2, and we are talking about Iron Man 3. And very specifically, this episode is going to focus on a very specific part of Iron Man 3, which is the part that most people want to talk about or want to hear opinions on. And I think that's okay to do that because I've discussed Iron Man 3 at length in a few separate videos. It was one of my top 10 movies of 2013, so it got its own little recap and analysis there. Looking at the character of Iron Man, of the Avengers as a whole, of the Shang-Chi stuff, I've mentioned Iron Man 3 in there as well, so he's come up quite a bit. But I won't skimp on my work. I will give you all a brief recap and a brief knee-jerk reaction to my opinions of the movie before I get into the spicy content that we're about to talk about. So basically, Iron Man 3 is the first film of the Phase 2 era of the MCU. Basically, it was the first test because they'd already had all their standalone films in Phase 1, and then they all came together to play in the big team-up event, cinematic moment, The Avengers. But Iron Man 3, and indeed Thor and Captain America and all the other sequels that came after that, had to prove that these superheroes could then return to their own franchises and engage in their own adventures and stories and still have it mean something, still have it be relevant. Once you hit something as big and exciting as the Avengers, does everybody then go, all right, cool, now let's go see what Iron Man's doing in Malibu? Oh, he's up against the Gobbler, who gobbles, whatever. It's a terrible example, but you get what I mean. Once they take on an alien invasion in New York City, how do you then believe there's stakes and there's drama for Iron Man to take on something as simple as a terrorist organization? I think Iron Man succeeded remarkably well, and I have said before that it is one of my favorite MCU films. I have a top 10 MCU list. Iron Man 3 is on that list. I would even argue that it's my favorite Iron Man film. I think Iron Man is a better film. It's probably more important. It's probably more competently done in terms of the Iron Man origin story and the story and the scale of the MCU. But in terms of Iron Man 3, the style, the humor, the evolution of Tony Stark's character, I get a lot more out of it. I'm a huge fan of director Shane Black when he makes good movies. He's not always successful in that regard, but a lot of his good films involve the buddy cop, neo-noir genre, such as Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys, and a lot of that comes very much into his approach to directing Iron Man 3. I'm also a big fan of the direction that Tony took in this movie, and how it showed that, okay, yes, everybody plays together, and now we're existing in a world where Iron Man 3 has to acknowledge that the Avengers exist and aliens exist. But at the end of the day, these standalone movies will still be about the character you are coming to see. Iron Man movies will not become the Iron Man and Friends hour. Thor, even when he plays with Hulk, Captain America, even when he plays with Iron Man, at the end of the day, they are still the stars of their own franchises, and they are still making solid content and movies. So the plot of Iron Man 3 is very simple. Tony is suffering from post-traumatic stress from having to go through the alien invasion of the Avengers and flying a nuke through a wormhole to another side of the galaxy. So he's compensating for that by delving into his work and building more and more Iron Man suits. He's losing who he is as a person. Meanwhile, America is dealing with the threat of this mysterious Ten Rings terrorist organization led by a mysterious terrorist called the Mandarin, who is carrying out all sorts of terrorist acts, specifically against America and the President of the United States. Collateral damage is Happy Hogan at some point, Tony's loyal friend and butler. Tony's not happy about that. He calls out the Mandarin, so the Mandarin completely obliterate his house. What follows after that is Tony has to go into hiding without his suit, without backup, without Pepper, without Rhodey. He has to try and regroup and come back stronger to face his enemies, all while dealing with his lack of confidence, his lack of calm, his constant panic attacks. And then, of course, eventually leading to a culmination against the Mandarin, or who the Mandarin is revealed to be, his plans. Rhodey comes in to help. Pepper gets caught up in the crossfire as well. There's many Iron Man suits and situations and rescue stuff. And at the end of the day, Tony proves that there's more to him than just the suit. There is a difference between Tony Stark and Iron Man. I like movies like this, and I mentioned the same with the Wolverine that also came out in 2013. They're very good at stripping back the superhero part of our character and focusing on who Tony Stark is or who Logan is. These are regular people. They are not superpowered by any means. They weren't given a super soldier serum. They don't have a magic hammer. They don't have mystical space powers or anything like that. Tony's just a guy who builds a suit. He gets in that suit and yeah, he can do super heroic stuff, but strip that back and he's just a guy who can break easily. Top that with his very, very, very over-the-top personality. He's a narcissist, a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, as he's described many times before. He's his own worst enemy in a lot of situations. And you have a very interesting character that it is interesting to see how he has evolved, not just becoming the Iron Man that we know from the other two, but now being a part of the Avengers and being part of a larger world and bigger threats coming, and having glimpsed what is out there coming to attack Earth, how that's affecting his mind. It's a very personal, very high stakes film without actually having the high stakes of an alien invasion, which I really, really like. Robert Downey Jr. absolutely knocks it out of the park as Tony. He proves that he understands the character, and again, there's that line where you don't really know where Robert Downey Jr. ends and Tony begins. And because there's a lot less of the Iron Man situation, you see a lot more of Tony as himself, especially when he's hiding out with this kid Harley. You really understand what makes him tick, what his motivation, what his goals are, who he loves, who he doesn't love, all of that stuff as well. All of his side characters, they're there. I will say that they don't get that much to do in this. I feel like Rhodey specifically, this is going off topic a bit here, but War Machine has never really had a moment to shine in the MCU. Yes, he's always been there. He's like the loyal member of your football team who isn't the quarterback, who isn't the, I don't know, any other football position, so this is a bad example. But he always shows up to the game. He doesn't miss a game. He doesn't do anything to particularly stand out or to save the day, but he's consistently there for support, encouragement, and humor at times. And that's what Rhodey is in the MCU. He's always there to back up Tony, and then when things evolve into the Avengers and he joins the Avengers, he's there to back up the Avengers. He gets hurt, he gets caught up in situations which are a little above him, but he always rises to the occasion. And even though he's one of the few Avengers still alive in the Avengers Endgame time heist excitement, he's still there for comedy relief. You don't really understand how the situation of the snap has affected him or what he's really been up to or what his goals or motivations are. He's there to support the other bigger superheroes. For the most part in Iron Man 3, there's an interesting concept of War Machine being rebranded as the Iron Patriot, becoming a symbol for America. But apart from popping up briefly at the start of the film, he disappears. And then he comes back later just to be wrapped into the situation to then help Tony. But there's not that people have argued, oh, they've got the buddy cop relationship that Shane Black has in his other movies. They have a good repertoire, but it's not the two of them teaming up together for most of the film. Rhodey disappears and comes back and helps, but he's not really developed as a character much in this movie. Pepper is the romantic foil for Tony. She's there for Tony to have something to fight for. She really doesn't have much to do here either. Happy has an interesting arc for the brief bus he's in the film. Jarvis is stripped away because it's part of stripping back Tony's identity as Iron Man, so he doesn't get much to do. And in terms of our villains, I think Guy Pearce's Aldrich Killian is an interesting villain. It's interesting to see his origin. He's one of the many villains that would come that were born as a result of Tony being a jackass. He may be the first one, but he certainly wasn't the last one. He's pretty interesting. He's a good scene-chewing sort of villain. He's sort of like an evil version of Iron Man, which is interesting. He doesn't really stand out as the most memorable villain, but at least there's some drive and character and motivation for him that a lot of villains in MCU history have lacked. The action's great. The style is great. Shane Black's very non-linear style of storytelling with Tony narrating the situation as if he's speaking to the audience. Have some good set pieces, some good action, or most characters, however short they show up for, do have an important role to play. But at the end of the day, it's a very exciting action film that, for the most part, finishes the Iron Man story in terms of his own franchise. After this, there are no more Iron Man movies. He showed up in other films to help out. You could argue he is the star of the Avengers film, so there was still more to tell for Tony's story. But in terms of where Tony began at the start of Iron Man to where he ended at Iron Man 3, you do feel like there is a sort of arc to his journey and transformation into a hero, to understanding who he is as a person, what his motivations are, what his goals are, and where to draw the line between being Tony and being Iron Man. It's a great film. It's a great film. I think a lot of people would appreciate it more if we didn't have the issue that I'm about to address. So I will quickly say here that Iron Man 3 gets a 8 out of 10 from me. It's a fantastic entry in the MCU, a good start to Phase 2. It was a good way of showing that there were plans for these characters outside of the Avengers. Once that happened, you could go back to these franchises and continue that storytelling, and nothing would be lost. But what hovers over this film, and it has hovered over it for years, it's even come up more this year with the Shang-Chi movie, is the whole Mandarin thing. Now, I don't like to spoil things on this show, but I am talking about a movie that's 9 years old and is part of a larger cinematic universe that, at this point, if you've seen Shang-Chi, if you've seen anything to do with Marvel Avengers movies, you know the twist, you know what the point is, but I will warn that I am going to talk about it. It's the first time I'm actively talking about a spoiler of sorts. So if you haven't seen Iron Man 3 for whatever reason, now's the time to stop listening to me and go and watch the movie. And then you'll know exactly what it is I'm talking about when it happens, and you can come back and hear me talk about it. Alright, so the issue of Iron Man 3 that everyone has a problem with, and I never did, is there is a twist in the movie. The Mandarin is the villain of Iron Man 3. He is a very, very well-known comics villain, the arch enemy of Iron Man in the comics. I guess from the moment an Iron Man movie was made, Iron Man fans from the comics have been like, can't wait for him to face the Mandarin. The Mandarin, oh boy, when he shows up, it's going to be nuts. Iron Man's going to have an incredible confrontation with him. The Mandarin to Iron Man is, I guess, what Green Goblin is to Spider-Man, or Magneto is to Professor X. I say this because I don't really read the comics. As much as I love the Marvel movies, I've never really sat down and read the comics, but I'm aware of them as a concept. I picked up a few here or there. I've done some research for things like Civil War. I learn about the characters through the movies, and then I go back and I research them, or I look into them comics-wise. But I am aware of the very, very well-known story arcs like Civil War, or Tony's alcohol problem, or Captain America freezing in the ice or being sent to the president and all of that stuff. Spider-Man's origin story, the Clone Saga. A lot of Spider-Man stories I'm very familiar with. But, so, Mandarin comes into this movie. He's cast to be played by Ben Kingsley. I don't know if that's racist or not. I don't know what Mandarin's ethnicity is in the comics. We're not here to talk about that. Ben Kingsley is a great actor, and he looked very imposing and sinister and evil in the trailers. So for whatever reason, he seemed like he would have a good presence as the Mandarin and be a good villain for Iron Man. But then you also have Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce, who's sort of in the movie as well, and he is very much a villain. He seems to be a part of the Mandarin's Sinister Ten Rings organization in some way or another. But then halfway or 2/3 into the movie, when Tony goes on a mission, he finds out that the Mandarin that we see, played by Ben Kingsley, is not in fact the Mandarin, or not even a terrorist at all. He is a washed up English actor called Trevor Slattery, an original character created for these movies, not pulled from any comics at all. He's a buffoon, he's a dummy, he's a silly billy, and he reveals to Tony that Aldrich Killian hired him to be the face of the Ten Rings, to be this Mandarin, to scare the American public, to do all these things so that they would put themselves in a position for Aldrich Killian, who argues is the true Mandarin, to enact his sinister plan for the American government. Now, at the time, the twist worked. It shocked the hell out of me. I remember sitting there in the theaters. I was the only one because I couldn't get anyone to come see the movie with me. And I went, oh, whoa, I did not see that coming. I was genuinely shocked and surprised. And I love a good twist in a movie. I don't like when movies are predictable. And one could argue for comic book movies that adapt characters and storylines, that if you're familiar with those things, it is predictable. If you're familiar with the Green Goblin's confrontation with Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, then whenever they show up in a Spider-Man movie, you can sense at some point those particular events are going to go down exactly as they do in the comics. There might be a slight variety, but Green Goblin's going to do a thing, Gwen Stacy's going to suffer as a result of it. Cue tears, even though they are expected tears. So something like this I thought was shocking. It threw me on my back foot because I did not expect it. I expected the Mandarin to be exactly what he is in the comics and exactly what he would be in the movies. But instead, the Mandarin as a concept wasn't really in the movie. Aldrich Killian certainly wasn't the Mandarin. He was using the idea of the Mandarin. And Trevor Slattery was just a punk. He lost all gravitas and fear once you realize who he was and what his intentions were. And I remember leaving that movie theater going, that was a great twist. I'm genuinely shocked. But then the fallout afterwards was either you had the diehard Mandarin fans who said that it was an insult to the Mandarin character to do that, and they'd expected the Mandarin and they didn't get the Mandarin. And then it delved into all sorts of other stuff in terms of racial representation and all of that and blah, 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 which I can't get into because I'm a basic white guy. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about there. But as a result, it's always hung over the MCU, that infamous twist, which either you like it or you absolutely hate it. I'm the one who likes it, obviously. But it's always sort of been there, and there was damage control immediately after the movie came out. A short film was released a year later which showed Trevor Slattery in prison, and this representative of the true Mandarin shows up and says, oh boy, the Mandarin's not happy. You were using his visage, his intimidation to commit your crimes. Well, he wants to talk to you, and he's probably going to kill you. And that sort of was there to sort of go, okay, so you haven't really seen the Mandarin. We do plan to bring the Mandarin in at some point, but not right now, and not really. And it reeks of, oh, okay, people don't like it. They're getting very upset. We need fallout. We need damage control. Let's just say that our plan was always to introduce the real Mandarin at a later date, even though we have no more plans for Iron Man movies, and Iron Man as a character isn't going to appear again after Avengers Endgame. And then finally, last year, we got Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings, which showed that Shang-Chi's father, Wenwu, was the was this particular Mandarin, even though he doesn't really use the word. It's an on-the-nose thing to use that term, the Mandarin. I don't know, I haven't looked too much into it, but I think it's one of those comic-y things which is a bit, you gotta find a way around it. It's sort of like M'Baku from Black Panther. His comics persona is that he's a villain called Man-Ape, and for obvious reasons, no, it's not acceptable to do something like that now in today's society. So the Mandarin might also fall into that category. There's a brief scene in Shang-Chi where Wenwu explains that he is the Mandarin, or the concept that they were using, but he never says, I am the Mandarin, and he's called the Mandarin for the rest of the movie. He's Wenwu, he's Shang-Chi's father, he's the leader of the Ten Rings. At the end of the day, the twist really seems to throw clout over the movie to a point where people don't appreciate the movie as a whole, or the impact of a twist like that, and just say, Iron Man 3 sucks because of that twist. I don't like that twist, so I don't like the movie. And that's completely unfair. Fine, you're not a fan of the twist, whatever. But the movie itself is not make or break because of the twist. The twist happens when there's only maybe 30 minutes left to go in the film. So if you're enjoying the film and then that happens, how does it completely ruin the movie for you? I don't know. I don't understand. Me personally, I like when unexpected things happen in movies. I don't want to go to a movie and be able to predict exactly what's going to happen. In the same way that I don't understand that when things are being made and there's movies are in production, TV shows, that people browse the internet for those paparazzi photos to get glimpses of actors on set so they can say, officially revealed, Nick Fury is appearing in the movie, or something like that. There's nothing like experiencing a movie and feeling the genuine reaction that you would get when you experience the movie for the first time, whether it's shock, whether it's surprise. I know those are the same thing. Whether it's happiness, sad, anger, confusion, however the movie wants you to feel in that situation, that's how it should feel naturally. And there's nothing matches that feeling of having an emotional response to what you're seeing in one way or another. I don't understand sitting down going, all right, now thanks to all my research, or thanks to my understanding of the Mandarin as a character, he's going to do this, and then he's going to go over here, and then he's going to say this, and this is how Iron Man's going to defeat him. I thought it was a fun twist. I thought it was a great spin. It was unexpected. It created a whole new character, which, for what it's worth, Trevor Slattery appears in Shang-Chi. Ben Kingsley plays him again, and people loved him in it. So what the hell? I don't get it. But that thing, that's hanging over Iron Man 3, that's unfair. And even though I've spent a majority of this episode talking about it, people need to get past that or understand its purpose or intention. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But I don't think it should ruin the whole movie for you. It seems a bit silly in my opinion. Personally, I loved it. Thought it was a great twist in a great movie. There you are. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed, except for all the Mandarin lovers and Iron Man 3 haters who just think I'm a piece of shit. And that's okay. People are entitled to their own opinions, however wrong they may be. I will be back tomorrow, speaking of which, for a review of a Marvel movie. No, it is not an MCU movie, despite what Sony wants you to think. I'm reviewing Morbius, and from what I hear, it sucks. But sometimes I like shitty things, so maybe I'll like it. You'll just have to tune in tomorrow to find out. But until then, I love and appreciate you as always. Stay kind to one another. Stay safe. Remember, we're all human beings. There's no need to slap each other over anything at all. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.